Sure.
All right, so yeah, now we are transmitting.
Okay. Hello, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the 10th online gathering of young Theosophists. Before we start, I would like to ask you to close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath and meditate about these words from Jiddu Krishnamurti. In oneself lies the whole world. And if you know how to look and learn, the door is there and the key is in your hand. Nobody on earth can give you either the key or the door to open, except yourself. Okay, thank you. Now you can open your eyes and we can start with the presentations. Our topic for today is dreams and theosophy. And we have 4 excellent panelists today. Okay. Our first panelist is Justin Tansley. He is from the United States, 34 years old. He lives and works at the Theosophical Society in America. He is a student of Theosophy and lover of all life. Please welcome Justin.
Hello, everyone. Before I start my talk, I just wanted to preface with a personal statement. So I'm going to be talking about the astral plane, and as an individual, I personally believe that our aspiration should be aimed at the higher spiritual planes, and as a result of that connection that we may potentially make with our inner self, our higher self, the soul, as a result of that, we may begin to be awakened on lower psychic planes, such as the astral plane. And so I just wanted to make clear that my personal belief is that it's not important to aim at the astral plane as something to be achieved. Rather, it's something that comes as a result of other things that we're doing on the path. So I will begin my talk. I actually wrote everything down this time, so I'll just simply be reading. Okay. Today's panel will be discussing the topic of dreams from various angles and perspectives, from the scientific, psychological, and theosophical views. With limited time to discuss such a large topic, I've chosen to explore a portion of the dream experience that we all probably have heard of as the astral plane. It has been said that dreams are mostly comprised of little bits of memories that we can recall from our experiences upon the astral plane. With that being said, I find it fitting to start with the astral plane in regards to the topic of dreams. Quote, most of us, then, are awake on the astral plane during the sleep of the physical body, and yet we are generally very little awake to the plane and are consequently conscious of our surroundings there only vaguely, if at all, end quote. Although dreams are not limited to this plane, they are most commonly experienced by a majority of humanity at this point in time within the plane we call the astral. In my preparation of this short talk, it became apparent that not all of us are moved or inspired by the same keynotes or styles of lecture. So typically, I would attempt to speak from the heart with a devotional standpoint and lots of idealism. All of that is to say, I've chosen for this talk a more pragmatic approach to the topic at hand. There was a 19th century scientist named Dmitri Mendeleev who was obsessed with finding a logical way to organize the chemical elements. He said, quote, "In a dream, I saw a table where all the elements fell into place as required." This later became known as the periodic table of elements that we've all probably seen in science class. Also, it has been stated that the famous philosopher, mathematician, and scientist René Descartes made a decision to devote his life to tearing down everything he had been taught was true and building it back up on a firm foundation, a project he said came to him in a dream. This process later becoming known as the scientific method. With the two above examples, there should be no debate as to the importance and significance dreams can potentially have for all of us. Now, whether these two particular dreams were aspects of the psychological brain movements or an inspiration brought back from the astral plane, I will not pass personal judgment. For this short talk, I will be working with material from a book titled The Astral Plane by C.W. Ledbeater. To quote Annie Besant in regards to this particular writing, she says, quote, "In this little book, the author approaches the invisible world from the modern standpoint of science." It is important to know that Ledbeater was a highly trained clairvoyant who was not only able to traverse the astral plane in sleep, but in full consciousness as well. This ability allowed him to make scientific investigations of the phenomena of the astral plane. According to Ledbeater, quote, "Man passes the whole of his life in the midst of a vast and populous unseen world. During sleep or in trance, when the insistent physical senses are for the time in abeyance, this outer world is to some extent open to him, and he will sometimes bring back from those conditions more or less vague memories of what he has seen or heard there." So now we know that there's this place, or perhaps rather this dimension called the astral plane. But what is it and where is it? As a beginner, it is important to remind myself that the astral plane is not in a particular geographical location. It is not separate from the locations that each of us inhabits at this very moment. It is all around us, interpenetrating all space and objects everywhere. It is a state of vibration. It's also material, made up of varying degrees of materiality. It is more subtle than the dense physical material we are accustomed to dealing with while conscious in our physical bodies. It is said to be the next plane above the physical. Now, it's not above in the sense that it's higher or like up, like the sky or the clouds. Rather, it is in a higher frequency or rate of vibration. It is imperceivable to the ordinary five senses, but nonetheless, it is indeed real. Quote, "The objects and inhabitants of the astral plane are real in exactly the same way as our own bodies, our furniture, our houses, and monuments are real." So at this point, it'd be helpful to make it clear that humans are multidimensional beings, which is to say we have our being in more than just the physical world. Along with the physical plane, along with the physical plane, which we have a physical body and also an etheric body, the human being also operates at the level of the astral plane with an astral body. Next is the Devatronic plane, also more frequently called the mental plane. And on that plane, we have a mental body and a causal body. before I continue reading, I just want to make note that when I say physical body, astral body, mental body, and so forth, it's really just to say that consciousness needs a body in order to communicate or to express itself on a particular plane. So right now, consciousness is moving through my brain into creating language, and I'm speaking, and I'm using a physical body in the physical plane to express consciousness. Another way to look at it is on the astral plane, if we isolate consciousness for 1 second and then think about the fact that it needs a vehicle in order to express itself. So on the astral plane, there's an astral body. On the mental plane, there's a mental body. And these are just vehicles that help consciousness express itself in any given plane. So the next preceding plane is the Buddhic. And on the Buddhic plane, we have a spiritual body. And following that, there is the Nirvanic plane, which corresponds to the Atmic principle. So one more note, on the Nirvanic plane, and I don't know much about this, but on the Nirvanic plane, consciousness doesn't necessarily have a body like it does on the planes preceding. It's more of it's very subtle. So it's not to say there isn't a vehicle, perhaps, but I'd say that the vehicle is consciousness is the vehicle of consciousness at the Nirvanic point. Maybe that's a good way of looking at it. Without moving any further into discussion about the higher planes, I would like to direct your attention to the idea of subplanes, particularly the 7 subplanes of the astral. Upon first learning about this inner world, I never stopped to consider its divisions. Just as the physical plane has solid, liquid, and gaseous states of matter, making up what we could safely call the lower 3 subplanes of the physical, the astral plane, too, has varying states among its subplanes. Now, in my understanding, these subplanes are not stacked on top of each other like paper, like this paper, but like before mentioned, they are interpenetrating each other. In the physical world, quote, the higher we rise, the more rarefied does the air become, and the same is true with regard to astral matter. On the 7th, or the lowest subplane, quote, most students find the investigation of this section an extremely unpleasant task, for there appears to be a sense of density and gross materiality about it, which is indescribably loathsome to the liberated astral body, causing it the feeling of pushing its way through some black viscous fluid, while the inhabitants and influences encountered there are also usually exceedingly objectionable. On the highest 3 subplanes, quote, a visitor who knew nothing higher might wander contentedly enough there among forests and mountains, lovely lakes and pleasant flower gardens, which are at any rate much superior to anything in the physical world, end quote. I've heard the subplanes referred to as neighborhoods, and each one represents a differing environment and energy or vibration. I also wanted to make a quick note that in regards to the lower subdivisions of the astral plane, it's really nothing for any of us to be worried about. I believe that we're all protected. And part of that protection, I believe, is living a virtuous life, being of service to other beings, having good intentions, essentially living a theosophical life. These are all ways that I believe that we could be protected in the lower subplane, or protected from even being in sympathy with the lower subplanes of the astral. And so also, I think we're all consciously evolved enough at this point that within our individual being, there's probably very little amount of astral matter that would be in resonance with or in vibration with those lower planes. So in that way, lower subplanes. So in that way, I think we are all protected. Prior to ending this quick crash course about the astral plane, it may be advantageous to mention briefly some of the inhabitants of this inner world. Ledbeater mentions that there are humans that are either dead or alive, conscious or unconscious. Among those quote unquote dead people are helpers of humanity or pupils of a master of wisdom awaiting reincarnation. Some of these, the human inhabitants of the astral plane, could simply just be someone who's asleep and they're in the astral plane. And probably a lot, if not most, people who are asleep in the astral plane are unconscious of their surroundings. So they're almost encased in a bubble of their own feelings and thoughts from their day-to-day lives. There are also numerous non-human entities, from differing types of nature spirits, fairies, gnomes, and elves to angels and elemental forces and energies. The inhabitants span a multitude of creatures and beings, and it would take a considerable amount of time to catalog the various types in any good detail. In conclusion, I would like to just say by no means does this very short talk even begin to really uncover the depths in which one could go in regards to the astral plane or dreams in general. I do highly suggest reading the book, The Astral Plane by C.W. Ledbeater, and also another book called Invisible Helpers, which is a book that could be beneficial in our understanding of the astral plane and the good work, I repeat, the good work that is possible while upon it. With a last word, I will read a small portion from the book Invisible Helpers. This is two quotes that I put together as one, essentially. All the charming folklore of the elf, the brownie, and the gnome, of the spirits of the air and water, of the forest, the mountain, and the mine, is shown by it to be no more a meaningless superstition, but to have basis of actual and scientific fact behind it. In that life, referring to the astral plane, as in this, there are many people who need assistance, and we should be ready to try and give it in any way that we can. For there is a vast amount to be done, and that along many different lines. So in peace, in service, in gratitude, that is the end. Thank you all.
Thank you, Justin. Our second panelist is Elena Bessie Camplone. She is from Italy, 35 years old. She is a sympathizer of the Theosophical Society since 2014, and she enrolled in 2019. For more than a year, she has been attending the study group of Pier Giorgio Parola on the secret doctrine. Please welcome Elena.
Hi, thank you. I'm very glad to be here today with you beautiful people. And okay, I share my slides. Okay. Oh, sorry, no. Okay. I want to start this presentation talking about the dream as the expression of a brain activity that is influenced by memory and our experiences. It is necessary for our body to re-elaborate the events that have occurred. And dreaming therefore reflects the good functioning of our brain and its mnemonic and our emotional organization. By approaching the world of dreams, we get more in touch with our emotional life and with the unconscious, and we can learn to know each other more intimately and expand the boundaries of our experience. It's a common event for all humans. There is no one who has never dreamed, at least for once. But not only, all animals dream, from the largest mammal to the smallest sparrow, even insects. Any being with a physical brain can dream. Madame Blavatsky tells us that in ordinary dreams, the active principles are kama, which is the principle connected to the personal ego and desire, awakened to chaotic activity by the dormant reminiscences of the lower manas or animal soul, the nefesh, the breath of life. And it's the ray that emanates from the higher manas or permanent ego, and is that principle that forms the human mind, the instinct in animals. And it is important to consider, I think, that the more our vehicle is polluted by predominant personality immersed in matter with toxic thought forms, the more we will not remember our dreams, or they will be unclear and confused. But where are we when we sleep? Has Justin mentioned it, but in a different way, because I like the Ledbeaterian system, which provides for the existence of 7 states of consciousness for each globe. In the Blavatskian system, each globe doesn't have all the planes, it has all the principles, and one can exist on one globe, on each globe, without having to use all the principles. Sorry. Here we can see this table reported in the Secret Doctrine, where the globes are also shown in relation to the Sephiroth. And during the sleep, we can use principles rather than others, and we visit all the globes daily. We awake on globe D, we dream with emotions on globe C and E, we dream without emotions on globe B and F, and we sleep without dreaming on globe A and G. And when we go to another plane, we actually visit another globe, co-united but not consubstantial, occupying the same physical plane, influencing and influenced by others. When we have sensations on our globe D, we have them on a matter which, from galaxies to atoms, is correlated to globe D. But the things we perceive with our senses are not picked up by physical instruments, because the senses are based on the 6th principle, Linga Sharira, and are therefore astral. Each plane is a state of consciousness, but it's also a state of matter that is perceived by particular characteristic senses. Physical matter and senses, the 7th and the 6th principle are strictly connected. For each plane, the physical Stula Sharira is created from within, derives from Atma, Buddhi, Manas, Kama, Prana, until Linga Sharira, the principle of perception, the 6th principle. And it creates with the perception modeling, passive and active, its object, the 7th element, the object of sense of perception. Currently, humans have 5 senses that we developed during the first 5 races in order of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. And the first to be obtained are those that are the most developed. During the 6th and the 7th races, 2 more senses had to be developed, of which the presentiment and intuition are anticipations. And as we advance in our evolutionary process and pass from the 5th to the 6th race, from the 6th to the 7th, we acquire beyond new senses also the ability to remain conscious on globes located on higher planes. After dominating the manas, we conquer Maya Virupa that allows us to have these experiences. Sorry. Okay. The astral light is the substance that embodies the potential of all things. It is to catch as the germ is to the seed. In the monad, as in each of its rays, there is the astral light. Therefore, there are the universal astral light, that of the earth, and that of every human, which is called astral body or Linga Sharira. In the astral world, there are models that keep their conformation for a long time. There are fields of force that serve as a model for physical structure. The dharmas, all the events of life or reality, are like the music that is written on the astral light, with different compositions of note or rather of skanda, and which is played with the characteristic timbre of the various personalities. The astral light is the bridge between the body and the spirit, is the soul, what lies between the spiritual and the physical. The astral light is therefore not spirit, but is the lower part of that cosmic body of which Akasha constitutes the upper part. What happens in the physical world is therefore a consequence of what is recorded in the astral light, in the astral world. And what happens in the physical world is incessantly recorded to be an efficient cause in the future. Every action, every thought, and every emotion, all the smallest elements of the events survive forever of those to those who produce them. Nothing is lost. HPB in Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge of Theosophical Society confirms that the nature and functions of real dreams cannot be understood unless we admit the existence of an immortal ego in mortal humans, independent from the physical body. Ego, which is not to be confused with what we call higher self. The higher ego corresponds to the Manas principle, while the higher self corresponds to Atman, which is active only in superior state of consciousness, as the Pratyeka Buddha, the one who has achieved detachment from any form of materiality and exists in pure subjectivity. We can understand that what we often consider as dreams in truth are wandering pages torn from the life and experiences of inner human, and whose back memory is more or less distorted by our physical memory at the moment of awakening. The personality mechanically captures some impressions of the thoughts and actions performed by the inner human during his hours of complete freedom. Our ego lives his own separate life in his Stula Sharira prison during the sleep of the physical human. This ego is the actor, the real human himself. The physical human usually cannot feel or be conscious during dreams. The personality, the external human, with his brain and his thinking apparatus is more or less completely paralyzed. And the day of the body is like the night of the soul. So the night of the body corresponds to the day of the soul. And we could compare the true ego to a prisoner and the physical personality to the jailer of his prison. If the jailer falls asleep, the prisoner escapes, or at least passes outside the wall of his prison. It's like the sulfur for the alchemist imprisoned in the putrid and dark prison. The tree fell into the fall, the triangle wedged in the square. And also according with what Madame Blavatsky stated in Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge, there are 7 types of dreams. But what does neuroscience say about dreams? Science study many aspects of how our mind works during sleep. We know that the brain, unlike the body, continues to work at night. With the electroencephalography, which is the method that we need to evaluate the activity of all the neurons, we can study what phenomena occur in our head while we sleep. And we know that the basic activity of a healthy brain in waking conditions, is characterized by a pretty fast, not very wide basic activity. Regular rhythm, And the waves produced by the waking brain are mostly the beta waves, which are among the fastest waves produced by our brain. But in the 60s, the researcher found another type of waves which are faster than beta and are typical state of deep meditation and great energy related to the will, higher mental processes and physic powers with concentrations and problem solving, the gamma waves, which are all most active in REM phase. And when we fall asleep, our brain waves slow down and get wider and wider with high peaks and deep deeps. And this stage goes from wakefulness to falling asleep. And these waves are typical state of relaxation, not yet properly sleep. And then we let slow down to theta waves, which are closely linked to our reflexive and imaginative abilities as well as to sleep. And it was found that these waves can relieve stress and decrease anxiety and facilitate the physical and mental relaxation. And to finally arrive at the lowest delta state, a state of dreamless sleep, where usually the mind seems to be almost inactive. And as we can see in this slide, this progressive lowering of brain activity follows 4 stages, and which slowly leads to deep sleep until we enter the REM phase, rapid eye movement phase. It is precisely in this phase that we dream. In this table, we can see that how brainwaves are related to globes, and we can see that how much more the brainwaves slow down, the more we go to a globe in a higher plane. So more we will be able to transcend our manas, the more we can be conscious during our visit on globe on superior state. In fact, what contemporary neuroscience call lucid dreams, I believe we can say that are like visits on superior globes with our Mayavirupa. There are many technical exercises to be able to have these experiences, like of lucid dreams. For every level of consciousness, there is always a way, a possibility, and nobody is denied the possibility of moving into a higher state of consciousness if they really want and is willing to accept the necessary rules that each level way requires. And I feel to talk about what is also expanded in the Voice of the Silence on the dangers of the lower cities. It's not useful for our spiritual growth to do exercises to reach powers before having made a path of awareness. The risk is to go crazy or get stuck in a kamaloka. It's therefore necessary to destroy Antakarana, reuniting the higher manas with the lower manas. In fact, whoever wants to hear and understand others' voice must first know the nature of dharana, and the lamp must be sheltered from any wind before it can burn with steady light. This means that in order to hear the voice of our higher ego, we must first make an effort to get away from the perishable and live in the eternity. The mind is the great destroyer of reality, so the disciple destroy the disciple, the destroyer. And to do so, Blavatsky explained to us that there are 3 rooms through it necessary to pass, and the astral region is the second of these 3 rooms, and it's also called the room of cognition, or the world of mediums. And here, Madame Blavatsky tells us that we must be careful not to linger too long. In fact, every flower that is picked in this dimension carries with it a snake twisted on its stem. This land of disciple is the room of pain, where pitfalls are scattered along the path of our trials to envelop your ego in the illusion called the great heresy. But if the disciple managed to make the final effort that greater, leaving behind him the captivating brilliance of the astral light, and being able to intimately understand the reality of life, to live in unity, when he chooses to hear the many, he will be able to discern the one, even in dreams. Oops, thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Okay.
Thank you.
Our third speaker is Shikhar Agnihotri. He is Bachelor of Science, Nautical Science, Mumbai University in India. He was merchant shipping, voluntarily retired after working for 10 years from shipping services to take the inner journey. He joined the Theosophical Society in 2008. He came in touch with the TS due to his mother, Miss Basumati Agnihotri, who is a member since 1980. Shikhar is founder member of TS Lodge Pragyan in Lucknow, founder of TOS group by the name Maitri in Lucknow. Given the duty of national lecturer of the Indian section of the Theosophical Society, he conducted study camps, seminars, youth camp, public lectures on theosophical subjects, and holistic health all over India in Theosophical Lodge, schools, and college. He wrote articles for international magazine, The Theosophists, The Indian Theosophists, Wake Up India, Hindi, French, and Spanish Theosophical magazines. Given the duty of international speaker of Theosophical Society and delivered talks in international forums. He started a YouTube channel called Pragya's CS Studio in May 2020 with his wife Catalina to make theosophical teachings accessible to as many as possible. Currently, he is volunteer at international headquarters of the Theosophical Society in Adyar, Chennai, India. Please welcome Shikhar.
Thank you, Stephanie, for the sweet introduction, and hearty greetings and good wishes to all of you from Adia. And it has been a pleasure to listen to Justin and Elena on this very important subject of dreams, because this is the only avenue other than meditation that has the potential to make us realize in a very subtle way, while we are still alive, that we are not just the physical body. And it also gives us the hints of our multi-dimensional existence at different layers of consciousness. Although I may be repeating many things that Elena has already mentioned, but never mind. It will refresh the minds, or it will impress rather more strongly into the minds of our brothers and sisters. So, coming to the subject, although the word dream has been highly misunderstood as being something unreal, but going by the 4 states of consciousnesses explained in the Mandukya Upanishad, the esoteric Hindu text, as waking, dreaming, dreamless, and the 4th state, Turiya. The dream state, in fact, is much closer to reality than we imagine it to be. As one of the Chinese Taoist philosopher, Chuang-Tzu, once dreamt that he was a butterfly. He dreamt that he was flying around from flower to flower, and while he was dreaming, he felt free, blown about by the breeze here and there. He was quite sure that he was a butterfly, but when he woke up, he realized that he had just been dreaming, and that he was really Chuang-Tzu, dreaming that he was a butterfly. But then he asked himself the following question: was I Chuang-Tzu dreaming I was a butterfly? Or am I now really a butterfly dreaming that I am Chuang-Tzu? Quite possible. We'll see at the end of the presentation. Anyway, let us leave it at that, and coming to the modern psychological view. These are the plane of consciousness that we have just discussed. Justin has also mentioned that there are various levels of consciousness in the form of a sphere, which are not one above the other, but concentric circles. So I would like to just pass by due to limit of time. So modern psychology, beginning with Freud and continuing with Jung, has thrown some light on the subject of dreams. As a result, we now understand, at least to some extent, the significance of dreams and what they can reveal about the elements of our nature, which are largely hidden to our waking consciousness. In the same light, HPB says, and I'll be using mostly HPB's language itself because it is so self-explanatory that there's no need for any other explanation. And she says, generally, during ordinary dreams, the physical brain of the lower personality is the main cause of dreams because, being the seat of memory, it radiates and throws off sparks like the dying embers of a fire during the night. That means whatever activities a person has lived during the day, the brain tries to reorganize them during the night based on memory, which is influenced by and responds to the state of mind or mental activity in which the sleeper was before falling asleep. And hence, there is so much emphasis on the state of mind before going to sleep, and recommended to study, meditate, or do something positive or think something positive before going to sleep for a student, not after watching some violent movie or going to sleep with an argument. Otherwise, the whole night, because the state of mind with which the last thought we goes in sleep also often is the first thought in the next morning. But as a rule, she says, HPB, that our memory registers only some fleeting and distorted impressions which the brain receives at the moment of awakening. not throughout the night, but during the moment of awakening, which happens many times during the night, whatever glimpses we catch, this aspect of dreams, however, has been sufficiently observed and is described correctly enough in modern physiological and biological works. As such, human dreams do not differ much from those of the animals. But then she says further, but that which is entirely terra incognita, like unknown territory for modern science, is the real dreams and experiences of the higher ego, that is the higher manas, which are also called dreams, but ought not to be so termed. That is, how do these differ in essence? So the nature and function of real dreams cannot be understood by modern science or by anyone unless we admit the existence of an immortal ego in mortal human being, which is independent of the physical body. Otherwise, the subject becomes quite difficult to understand unless we believe that during the sleep there remains only an animated form of clay, the physical body, whose powers of independent thinking are utterly paralyzed. But if we admit the existence of the higher ego or permanent ego in us, we can comprehend, we can understand that what we often regard as dreams, which are also called idle fancies, are in truth stray pages torn out from the life and experiences of the inner being. It's called inner man or inner human, the real divine, the higher manas, and the dim recollection of which at the moment of awakening is called a dream, which becomes more or less distorted by our physical memory. The brain catches mechanically a few impressions of the thoughts, facts witnessed, and deeds performed by the inner man during its hours of complete freedom. Because our higher ego lives its own separate life within its prison of clay, and whenever it gets a chance, free from the restrictions of matter, it lives its own life, just as Elena also gave the example of the ego. Compare the higher ego to a prisoner and the lower personality to the jailer of the prison. If the jailer falls asleep, the prisoner escapes. The jailer is half asleep and looks, nodding all the time out of the window, through which he can catch only occasional glimpse of the prisoner, as he would a kind of shadow moving in front of it. But what with our limited mind, physical mind or lower manas, can we understand of the life or the thought of higher planes? So then the question arises, how then esoteric philosophy account for the transmission of even a few fragments of those thoughts of ego to our physical memory, which it sometimes retains? All such activities are reflected on the brain of the sleeper like outside shadows on the canvas wall of a tent. If you are sleeping in the tent and there is light outside, if somebody is moving past, the shadow will be cast, which the occupier in the tent will see when he awakes. Then the brain thinks that he has dreamt all that and feels as though he had lived through something, while in reality, those are the thoughts, actions of the true ego, the higher manas, which the individuality, which the physical brain has dimly perceived. And as he becomes fully awake, as we all experience, that these recollections become with every minute more and more fleeting and distorted and get mixed up with the images projected from the physical brain. So if you want to remember the dreams, if you want to make some sense out of it, before even getting up off the bed, just keep a notebook and pen next to your bed, and just note it down. That's how JK wrote at the feet of the master, that he was taken in his astral body with C.W. Ledbeater to the Mahatmas, and the moment he returned back, when he woke up, immediately he used to write everything in his notebook. And these recollections of the mind, by the power of association, set in motion various trains of ideas. Then what is the part played by will in dreams, which is also related to dream incubation, lucid dreaming, and inception? HPB says that the will of the outer man, that is our we, the low personality, is of course sleeping and inactive during the dreams. But a certain bent can be given to the sleeping will during its inactivity. As Justin gave the example of mentally, he was having this problem of how to arrange the elements in a order. He could not do it for months and months together. He was continuously thinking in that thought, and suddenly one night in dream, he got the solution. Similarly, Madame Curie, Albert Einstein, or so many other scientists got the solution or very important theories in the form of dreams. So with whatever will we go into the sleep, it will give a direction. If we want to meet someone, if we want to help someone who is in a depressed state of mind, or our family or friend, or some natural disaster has occurred, and if you want to help them, that's what is given in the book Invisible Helpers, that is written by C.W. Ledbeater, how we can even be of some use during our sleep. Now, a very interesting question. I'm taking all these questions from HPB collected writings because many of the facts have already been discussed. So I just wanted to share some curious questions about dreaming. So another question is, do adepts dream? Obviously, no advanced adept dreams, because an adept is one who has obtained mastery over his 4 lower principles and approaching the 5th, including his body, and therefore he does not allow the personality to have its own way. What he does is simply paralyze his lower self during sleep and becomes perfectly free. A dream, as we understand it, is an illusion. So shall an adept then dream when he has rid himself of every other illusion? The only thing is, in his sleep, he simply lives on another and more real plane. The only difference between him and us is that our consciousness gets a break in between. But for him, there is a continuity of consciousness. He is aware, he is conscious that he is leaving his body, living on another plane. But for us, it is almost impossible until we reach to a certain degree of evolution to actually pinpoint that moment when we slip into sleep, deep sleep. Then there is a question that, are there people who have never dreamt? And HPB says there is no such person in the world so far as she understands. Everyone dream more or less. Only with most, the dreams vanish suddenly upon waking. And this is, again, also, if you want to remember the dreams, as we just discussed, keep a notebook and pen next to yourself, but also, the moment we become aware that I am awake, do not make sudden movements or think of something else. Just get up very slowly and just note those things down. And over a period of time with this practice, we will begin to find a link or some kind of links or the types of the dreams that Elena has talked about. We might begin to get some messages or some advices for our spiritual path. And that is what is called by Sri Aurobindo the night school of yoga. So it's not just that when we are awake, we can practice our spiritual path, but also it is a night school of yoga when we are sleeping. Then what is the difference between the dreams of human being and those of beasts? As Elena already mentioned, the dream state is common not only to all humans, but also to all animals, from the highest mammals to the smallest birds, and even insects. Every being which has a physical brain or any organ which is close to be called a physical brain must dream. Every animal, large or small, has more or less physical senses, and though these senses are dulled during sleep, memory will still act mechanically, same like humans, reproducing past sensations. And she says that dogs and horses and cattle dream. We all know, and we might have seen if you have a pet dog in your house, or while sleeping, they sometimes, the expression on their face changes and they do certain actions while still dreaming. And she also says the same is with canaries, the birds. But the only difference is that such dreams are merely physiological, which relate to our state of calm manas dreams, not the actions of the life or the lives of the higher ego. Also, one of the questions very often asked is that how does it happen that person who has never seen, she has taken the question of mountains, but we can generalize it that how does it happen that we see some things in dreams which we have never seen before, and how are we able to note their features? So most probably because we might have seen the pictures of those events or those things or mountains or rivers or places, or the much deeper cause of this is somebody or something in us which has previously seen them, by which it means in some other lives we might have seen those mountains or visited or we might have been in different countries, born in different places. So during the deep sleep, when our true ego, for which there is no past and future, everything is eternal, now it has access to all our memories of the past. So from that memory, if some image comes up, and we call that image that we have seen mountains or something in our dreams. Another thing is, can a dreamer be en rapport with an entity in Devachan? As mentioned both by Justin and Elena, Devachan is, we can say, mental plane. And mental plane, we can actually come in contact with both, in people in astral plane and mental plane. And that's why sometimes the people who have just passed away, our relatives or friends to whom we have some affinity, we see in dreams because they are still in astral plane. And during the sleeping time, they have an opportunity to get in touch with us, especially if we are thinking about them. Similarly, the only possible means of communicating with a Devachani, that is in mental plane, is during sleep by a dream or vision, or in trance state, because no Devachani can descend into our plane. It is for us, or rather our inner self, to ascend to his plane. Then, very important thing HPB tells us that, is it a good thing to cultivate dreaming? And she answers it very emphatically that it is by cultivating the power of what is called dreaming that clairvoyance is developed. And she says that knowledge comes in visions, first in dreams, and then in pictures presented to the inner eye during meditation. Thus have I been taught the whole system of evolution, the laws of being, and all else that I know, the mysteries of life and death, the workings of karma. And this way of knowledge is, she says, that no other source of knowledge can be so convincing and with so much conviction when you get this knowledge from within. A very important question coming now is, are there any means of interpreting dreams? For instance, the interpretations given in dream books or by self-proclaimed experts or gurus who charge a very high fees and continue with their businesses without no offense to any genuine person who is working in this field. What HPB says that there is no way of interpreting dreams in a generalized manner. The only thing that is necessary and needed are the clairvoyant faculty and the spiritual intuition of the interpreter, which means the person has to be psychically evolved and also spiritually evolved. His spiritual intuition must have been developed. Then only that interpreter, that person, like we can call the rishis, the sages, the saints, the mystics, they can, but I don't think personally that anybody is doing, if he has made or she has made it a business, to what extent they can interpret a dream accurately, because every dreaming ego differs from every other, just as everyone's book of life differs. I cannot read yours, you cannot read mine. So similarly, the same symbol can mean different thing for different people, and until and unless the person knows, the interpreter knows the past and the present and all the situation, and added with clairvoyance, there can be no clear interpretation of that. So better have your own inner counsel than depending on someone from outside. And with this, I come to the end of the presentation, and I would like to end with a statement of Paramhansa Yogananda, which in a way relates to Chuang Tzu, whether I am a butterfly dreaming that I am Chuang Tzu, or whether I am Chuang Tzu who dreamt that I am a butterfly. Paramhansa Yogananda says that you are walking on earth as in a dream. Our world is a dream within a dream. You must realize that to find God is the only goal, the only purpose for which you are here. For Him alone you exist, and Him you must find. Thank you all for listening patiently and giving me this opportunity to share in brief some of the thoughts, some of the text for this very important subject. Namaste.
Thank you, Shikhar. Our next panelist is Janne Vuononvirta. He is from Finland. He is 35 years old. He has been a Theosophical member since 2007 and the General Secretary of Theosophical Society since 2018. He is too a student of Theosophy, finding it in his teenage years has been the biggest gift life has offered him. Please welcome Janne.
Thank you, Stephanie, for presenting me, and thank you, Raphael, for organizing this event, and all the previous speakers for your interesting talks. Just now, one moment, I will open my slides. And okay, now you should be able to see them. Okay, I will talk about dreams from a bit different perspective. First, I will try to explain shortly how dreams are seen in the current scientific perspective, and also how dreams are seen in the current psychotherapeutic setting. And also I will tell you something about Tibetan dream yoga, which is a way to well, it's a way to cultivate our consciousness towards the towards enlightenment as general in yoga. And my focus is how dreams and karma are related. So as Elena already mentioned, we have different kind of sleeps. We have deep sleep, or which is called non-REM, and usually during the deep sleep, we don't have any dreams, or if we are awakened during this deep sleep, if we remember dreams, they are more abstract, or they are not so colorful. They are not so many colors, emotions. They are more like thoughts. But then in every dream cycle, we sleep around 8 hours in a night, and our dream sleeping is it's comprised of cycles that last up around 90 minutes. And when we fall asleep, we usually have more deep sleep. The meaning of deep sleep is to balance our body. It's very important for our recovery. And quite recently, the scientists have noticed that there is a system called a glymphatic system that removes metabolic trash out of the brain, especially during deep sleep, but also during deep meditation. This is a very important system, and it's very easy to, well, for example, if you drink alcohol or use some drugs, this system doesn't work that well. And when we have slept some hours, usually we begin to have more Rem sleep, which is the state where the normal dreaming occurs. And so far, it's been a mystery for science why we dream or why animals dream. So far, it has been believed that dreams are some kind of white noise that just happens when the brain is working during the night. But during the past 2 decades, the scientists have started to note that dreaming may have some other purposes. There is a theory called threat simulation. When we investigate the normal dreams, you can find that it's very rare that we have very pleasant dreams. Usually dreams are a bit gray, sad, somehow negative or bad dreams. It's been stated that around 70% of the dreams are somewhat negative. And why is that? Well, according to science, they have theorized that dream is a state where we can simulate the events in life where we face danger, whether the danger is physical or social, and thus just as aviation pilots, when they learn to fly, they practice in a aviation simulator. So in a similar way, in a dream, we can simulate these events, and if similar events happen in our physical life, we are more prepared to act when something bad happens in our life. But also, dreams seem to have importance in social learning, emotional processing, and also it has a big role in creativity. Well, most of you have heard about Sigmund Freud, who is the developer of psychoanalysis. He stated that dream interpretation is a royal road to the unconscious. And actually, he built all his theory about the mind, about the unconscious, subconscious, etc., based on his dream research. He also stated that dreams are a fulfillment of wishes that we are not very conscious of. But his ideas, nowadays we think that his ideas are not very valid anymore. And actually, Aaron Beck, who is a developer of cognitive psychotherapy, he's still alive. He's about 100 years old, and actually he's very lively still. He's still making science. Well, he was a psychoanalyst before, but in the 1960s he made his own dream research to test whether this theory of Freud's that dream present wish fulfillment is true, and he noticed that it's not true. Instead, Aaron Beck made a notion that dreams present the belief system in a visual format, meaning that in dreams we can see how our mind is conditioned, how we relate to others, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to the world around us. Then to another topic called dream yoga in Tibetan tradition. It's very, it's not very widely talked about, but actually dream yoga has quite substantial role in Tibetan tradition. It's practiced also in Bon tradition, that is a pre-Buddhist tradition in Tibet, but also the more modern Buddhist schools practice dream yoga. And one famous teacher that taught dream yoga is Naropa, who lived in the 11th century. The first objective in dream yoga is to become aware of the dream state, meaning to achieve a lucid dream. The second phase is learn to control the dream state. This way, the person can purify the unwholesome aspect of the mind and also return to the state of bright light of consciousness. And according to Tibetan tradition, falling asleep and dying are similar processes. And if you learn to fall asleep consciously, you can also die consciously. And this is said to be one of the highest achievements in yoga. So using dream work, we can get out of the wheel of the karma. Let's look for a moment how karma affects our mind. So according to Tibetan tradition, the ignorance is the root cause of suffering. It means that it doesn't mean that we don't have knowledge, but it means that we see ourselves, we see the world as separate. We don't see things as they really are. And this leads to dualistic mind, meaning that I see myself as separate from you. I see myself separate from others. And this in turn leads that I like something and I don't like something, and it guides my action. And every time I act based on my likes or dislikes, it leaves a karmic imprint in my mind, which in turn strengthens the clinging or rejection, which again gives a tendency to repeat the previous action. These karmic imprints modify everything that in the mind. For example, our moods, emotions, thoughts, etc. Basically, it's very close to the belief system or conditioning, what I mentioned earlier. It can be said that karmic imprint is like a photo that is taken in a moment when one reacts with aversion or fondness. And in dreams, karmic imprints express themselves freely. These karmic traces or imprints, they can be active or latent, and usually the daily events can trigger or activate the latent imprints, and thus usually the dreams we see are very closely linked to our daily activities, our daily experience. There's a metaphor to explain how dreams are born, and you can think about these karmic imprints as a film, and the consciousness is like a light of the projector that runs through the film, and thus making the movie on the screen. And our psyche tries to make sense of the images, and thus making the movement. And this is how the usual dreams are born. I'm not going very deeply to the Tibetan dream yoga. There are some practices that you can try, but one of the before you try dream yoga, you need to have some basics. And basics, that is, the first is that you need to learn to meditate. You need some calmness in the mind. Then during the day, you practice that you try to be aware that this my daily life, it's a dream also. What happens outside myself, it can compare as a dream. Also, what happens inside me, it can compare as a dream. And when we are reaching the point when we are falling asleep, you need to make a decision to be conscious during the night, and you need to use your will if you want to succeed. But there were many various aspects in dream yoga, and I won't go to that very deeply. But before I end, I will give you a tool that you can use whether or not you are very experienced in dream yoga, or whether or not you have ability to use lucid dreams. And this is a modern way how you can modify the karmic imprints, but this is based on cognitive therapy. Or this special technique is called imagery rehearsal therapy, and it's specially used to treat nightmares, but in the same method can be used if you see dreams that somehow disturb you, or just bad dreams. So it's very simple. When you see a dream that disturbs you, when you are awake, you can change the dream in a way that feels right to you. And it's very important that you modify it in a way that you have a good feeling about it. It doesn't matter which way you modify the dream, and remember that dreams don't occur in on a physical plane, so you don't have to follow the laws that affect in the physical world. And after you have changed the dream, you practice it. You practice the dream, visualizing it 5 or 15 minutes in a day, and this way you can open the emotional knots that are behind the bad dream. In the beginning, this can be, well, this is a very simple technique, but in the beginning, especially if you have terrible nightmares, this can be difficult. So it's a good thing to practice with less worrying or troublesome dreams, and then bit by bit go towards the more difficult ones. But I can tell you a personal experience about this technique. For example, 2 weeks ago, I saw a dream in which I was in an old house. It was quite rusty and dusty. There was a lot of renovation needed in that house. It was a bit gray. There wasn't that much light in it, and the atmosphere in that house was a bit anxious. I wasn't in that house alone. There were other people also, and they were perhaps trying to renovate it, but they didn't make any progress because they didn't know what to do. And then I woke up. I still felt myself a bit anxious, and then I decided to try this technique to chase my emotional experience, to bring hope to myself. So I decided that I need light here. My first thought that, well, okay, I can just escape, but escaping is not really something that I wanted to do. It didn't feel right. So I decided to bring light to the dream. In the beginning, I had the box, and I opened it to bring light to the room. But it didn't, in my imagination, it didn't feel right. There was still these shadows, dark shadows on the wall. Then I decided that, well, I can become light myself, and then in this image I became light. So this light that was coming from me was lighting the house. But again, then I could see better where I was, but there was still the dusty house and other people who don't know what to do, and well, it wasn't still good. And then I had an idea that I could image blue flowers made of light, and I decided to give the flowers to the people so that they too could become light themselves, and then there would be more well, enlightened people in the house, and I wouldn't be alone in the house. And I know this, to some, this technique, it may sound funny, but to me it was very powerful way to work with my intuition, and it gave me courage to continue things that I do. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you one more time, all the panelists, for a deep and wonderful presentations. Now we are going to end the YouTube transmission, so we can continue with questions and comments. So if someone has